Hello again, welcome to another video, another kit build. But what are you seeing as a kit when in front of your nose is a Sinclair ZX Spectrum? Well, one of the things with Spectrums is that you need to know what's happening underneath, what's going on the circuit board. This is the circuit board, this is an issue 2 board. But before we start switching it on and playing games on it, we need to make sure that it actually works. And for that, we use something like this, which is a test cartridge. You plug it in the back, you switch it on, and it gives you the diagnostics, whether the CPU is working or not, whether the RAM's working or the ULA or something like that. This is a very good, very quick, very excellent tester. But I wanted something else to play with, and something with nice flashing lights. So, to one side, I bought this. It's not a cardboard box. So what's inside it? So this is a ZX Diag card. And this is a kit that you can build up. And as you can see, it's got a lot of nice flashing LEDs on it. A bit of advertising as well. You can't go wrong with a bit of advertising. So let's have a look, see what's inside here. Well, first of all, this is the circuit board. As you can see, I have already opened it, but everything is very easily laid out on there. There are a couple of on-board components that have been pre-soldered for us, so we don't have to worry about that, but the rest of it is through hole, so that's okay. The other thing I like about this is that all the components are individually wrapped. Not only that, they're individually numbered. So these are the numbers, as you'll see in a minute, that you go through to put them on the circuit board, which I thought was excellent. These are the ICs that come with the kit, and along with the ICs we've got IC sockets as well. Again, this is excellent that they've put those in the bag, saves a lot of messing around. Anything else in here? Well, look at that. We have a caramel biscuit as well. That is a bonus. That's worth buying it just for that. Nothing else. Right. Let's have a look at this in closer depth. We'll put the caramel biscuit away somewhere safe and we'll have a look at that later on. So these are the IC holders. We've also got the connector that goes onto the back of the Spectrum as well, and we've got the ICs that we need to put on the board. That's okay. The bags, as I said, are actually numbered. So we've got number 1 on there, and then 2, and then 3, and it's got all the numbers on here as well. Look, so we've got 1K resistor R4. Here we've got 11 resistors, and it's got the numbers on there. And I've just noticed actually all the components are pre-bent as well. That's another absolutely fantastic time-saving job to do as well. Red LEDs, blue LEDs, green LEDs. So look at that, that's great. Everything stepped, everything numbered, and everything pre-bent. Which is going to be quite easy to do. Let's put that to one side. So the last thing again is the circuit board. So up in the top corner here you can see that these onboard components are pre-soldered for us, and as you can see everything is numbered on the actual board itself. So let's get round to actually making it. Okay, so I've got the circuit board mounted on my little device here. I'm not going to just sit here and go through each individual component. I'll just show you one or two. This is the diode, which is in the back here. This is number 1, step number 1. and that goes into D1, which is just here. And the reason why I'm showing you this one is because on the diode's got a little line on the circuit board, and that matches up to the black line on the diode itself. So we can pop that in there, and that can be soldered up later on. So there we go, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to just fast forward this bit now so you can see what's going on, but it'll be faster speed. So far so good, everything is going okay, that's all the resistors done. The next thing we've got is 3 lots of diodes. These are the LEDs. So we've got the 10 red ones, the 10 blue ones, and the 5 green ones, which we'll be doing next. So just a quick note about LEDs. Let me get one of them out. Empty bag over there. Right, so on the LEDs we've got a long leg and a short leg. The long leg is a positive, and on the circuit board we've got a square hole, square and there, and a round hole. Let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see that. Oh, hope you can see that alright. So we've got a square connector there and a round connector there. The square is a positive, and that's where the long leg goes. So it goes in that way around like that. Let's just check to see where we are. D6 to D13. So these actually go on this row here, the data row. So again, we've got square and round, so the long leg goes into the square hole, and the LEDs fit in like that. Next we've got the capacitors. Now these are quite small. Let's get one of them out for you to show you. There we go. But they're not polarised, so it doesn't matter which way around they go. So just pop in C1. So there we go, it just pops in like that. So we've just got a few of those to do. By the way, on the LEDs you do get a few spares, which is quite good. The next one is a transistor which goes down here. I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit. There we go, that's better. Right. Now the reason I'm just showing you this is twofold. When I can get it out the back, that is. There we go. First of all, the legs are actually going to be quite close together on the circuit board here, so we've got to be careful. The second thing is, if you look here, we've got a flat side and a rounded side, and that matches up to the image on the circuit board here. You can see that all right. So we'll see on the circuit board here, we've got a flat side and a round side. So it goes in like this. But the soldering is actually going to be very close on the circuit board. I wish they left a little bit more room for the legs actually, because the soldering is going to be extremely close. So make sure that the solder line tip is nice and clean. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so the next thing we've got is some pin headers that we've got to put on, and some jumpers, and we've also got some switches and rubber feet. So that's the next job, to get those done. Right, we've got two main things left now. We've got the IC holders to put on, and we've got the edge connector to put on. So the IC holders, quite easy really. You've got to make sure that the number of holes match the IC holders that you're going to take out. So for example, you're not going to put it in there, but it will fit in there. The other thing to bear in mind is that there's a small cutout just at the top here of the IC holder, which is just there, and that matches up with the little cutout on the circuit board just there. So that goes in like that. The other thing to do with these is use a bit of blue tack just to hold the IC holder onto the board, tip it over, And then what we're going to do is we're just going to solder the two corners. So we're going to do this one up here and this one down here. Okay, and that's just going to hold it in place. Take your blue tack off, and then with your finger just hold underneath the circuit board. You see me do this with other components, and just hold it together and push against the IC holder against the board, and then just very easily just melt the solder, making sure you don't burn your fingers on the other side, and that will make sure that the IC holder is flush to the board like that is. Okay, and then once that's done, you can then carry on and solder the other bits up. So far so good. We've actually got everything on almost. All the diodes are in, resistors are in, capacitors are in, and the IC holders are in. The big thing that we've got to do now is to put this edge connector on. So there's something that we have to do about this first. So let's take this off the vise, or move it out of the way for a minute, and we'll have a closer look. So for the edge connector, what we're doing is the pins actually at the back are quite straight at the moment. If we try to solder that onto the circuit board, it'll be quite waffy. That's a technical term. So let's have a look first of all. I'm just looking with my magnifying glass. We've got a couple of bent pins, but that's okay, they're just bent in, that's not a major problem. But what we've got to do is to put it on the bench like this and just tip it forward so those legs slightly bend inwards like that. And then let's bring the circuit board over. Yep, that feels better, but it's still a bit waffy, so let's just do that again. Slightly bend the legs in again, both sides. Yep, that's getting there, still quite flexible, so let's do it again. And the other side. Yep, again we're getting there slowly, it's just they are going in. Don't want to over bend them because it'll be more difficult to get them out again if we over bend them. Yep, and again. Right, I think that's finally got it on. It was a bit of a pain, that, trying to get everything lined up right, but we've got it on eventually. So what I'm going to do with this is get a bit of flux. And I'm just going to just very gently just dab a bit of flux on there. The reason why I'm doing that is because those pads are quite big and they can pick up quite a lot of grease and mess. Just make sure, by the way, that the gap in here is lined up with the gap on the circuit board. And then all we've got to do now, as per normal, is just to solder it up. So what I'm going to do is chuck a bit of solder onto here, bit of solder onto this end. Like so. Before I go any further, double check that everything's lined up. Make sure the pins are lined up. Yep. So all I've got to do now is solder all the rest of them. Once you've finished doing all the soldering, the best thing is get a light and a microscope out. A lens I meant, sorry. And just double check all your soldering. As you saw when I was soldering, I did get a solder bridge, which I was able to sort out. Right, there we go. So let's just have a look. Both sides, just had to, here as you saw, I just had to tap one of them again just to solder it, melt the solder and reflow it, if that's okay. Don't forget, this edge connector is going to get a lot of beating. It's going to get a lot of plug in and unplug in into the back of the spectrum. Okay, so while it's like this, we just need to add the feet. And I'm going to add the feet now before I put the ICs on, because I'm going to push down on the board, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't pushing down onto anything like that. So I can now push down onto here. Now I'm not going to push down onto any of the soldering, so I'm going to push against that and against the feet, just there. So for the ICs, you just have to follow the number of pins. So we'll go for the smallest first. And if you remember, we said about having the little cutout on the socket. Well, the IC also has a little cutout as well. So you just have to make sure that that matches up with the socket on here. Now, okay, so these legs are, as you can see on here, splayed out a bit. So it looks like we're going to need our IC leg straightener. Put that in there. Don't have to turn it round, I just find it better if you do. Right, let's zoom in a bit so you can see what's going on. Yeah. Right, let's see if we can get this in now. So make sure that that cutout is lined up. Make sure your legs are lined up. Gently but firmly, just push the IC in and it'll just pop into place like that. And the next one is popped in here again. Again, I don't know which is which, I'm just going by the number of legs, which I think is what you're supposed to do. So this is quite easy. Yep, that's that one. We've got three the same now. Again, I'm just going to pop those in there, make sure the legs are just lined up. Check, make sure we've got the cutout in the same place, and then straight down, gentle but firm. There we go, and before we go any further, just check the ends to make sure that all the ICs are straight in the holders, like that. Double check all the edges, make sure that there's no pins hanging over the edges or bent or anything like that, so they look okay. And we've got the big one to do, the big one. So again, just the same as the rest of them. Pop that in there to make sure it's nice and straight, and making sure that we're lined up. Be a little bit more careful with this one because it's got more pins in it, but again, just firm but gentle. Check the end, make sure it's seated correctly, which it is, and checking all the pins, making sure that's okay. So there we go, that looks good. So that is the tester built. So we just need to make sure the jumpers are set right, and then we just need to plug it into a Spectrum and see what happens. Before we actually plug it into a Spectrum, there's a couple of jumpers that we have to make sure that we've got set right. So jumper 1, just here on the left hand side. So if the bottom 2 pins, pin 1 and pin 2, are bridged, then it will boot into the diagnostic software. If it's another way around, pin 2 and pin 3, then it will boot into the normal Spectrum boot up sequence. Jumper number 2, which is on the right hand side here, if it uses jumper 1 and 2, 1's been at the bottom by the way, 1 and 2, then it will ignore what's called the M2 on the CPU. This is like a timing circuit on the main Z80 chip. So if pins 1 and 2 are enabled, it will ignore that. If pins 2 and 3 are enabled, which I've got at the moment, it will use the M2 timing on the Z80. We've got another jumper on the side here. This really is to do with the compatibility with a Brazilian ZX Spectrum clone. So on that, if you had one of those, it's something to do with the audio, but I'm not entirely sure what. You would leave that disabled, but because we're using UK Spectrums and other clones, then that jumper can be closed. So that's on that one. One other thing, a quick thing I will do as well, is I'll just very briefly, very quickly, just run over the circuit board here with some cleaner. So I've got some cleaning solution here, and I'm just going to very quickly spray it on and give it a quick brush over. This gets rid of all that flux that's been deposited on the board while we've been soldering. Gives it a good clean up. Easier to see any bridges or any other sort of problems that you've had with soldering as well. Let's just get a cloth and just dry that off a bit. There we go. Because it's alcohol based, it will evaporate as well. So there we go, nice clean shiny board. I'm just going to put a little bit on the bottom there as well. There we go, so there we go, so nice and clean and shiny. That's what we like to see. Well, it's a couple of days later, and as you can see, the LEDs are working. But I have to confess, I made a slight mistake. So let's have a closer look at the board. You can see the LEDs are flashing away there. And if we look at our monitor, it's currently going through what's called a soak test. There we go, easy to see. So it's just running through the testing of the ICs. It's run 7 times so far, and it just loops it through multiple times until you tell it to stop. So this is what's called a soak test, but as you can see, it is actually running through okay, and then it just carries on in a loop. And the board is working, but let's have a closer look and I'll show you what I've had to do. Now, the problem before was the fact that the LEDs weren't flashing, and you may think, well, these are all clear LEDs, but as you saw in the video, they're actually coloured ones. Green is down here, red and blue. The LEDs I used before have all been chopped out, which are here, because I put them all in the wrong way round. I put the ground where the plus was and the plus where the ground was. So I had to desolder them all, and unfortunately, because they're so small, desoldering unfortunately damaged them. I've got a box here of spare LEDs out there, so you see the different colours. So I used the LEDs out of that to replace the LEDs that I inadvertently put in the wrong way around, and when I switched it on again, all the LEDs worked. So we saw the LEDs working just a minute ago on a board that actually works. So let's plug it into a board that's faulty and see what happens. Right, let's just scroll out a bit. Let's get rid of that lot. So here we have my next project, which is a board that I need to have a look at. The only thing I've done is a composite video mod on there. And before we switch on, we must plug in the board. Come on. There we go. Okay, so let's switch it on and have a look at the LEDs and see what's going on. Okay, so let's have a look at the screen. But first of all, you can see that we've got a colour border and just black and white lines. And if we look at the flashing lights, we can clearly see that there's something not quite right going on here on the dated lines here. We've also got some lights that are permanently on, which means that those are stuck, and some flashing lights here. And actually I know on this particular case that the fault is with the CPU, which is here. So I shall be replacing it. I shall order one and replace it. But that's what happens when you can see a faulty machine. You can tell by the lights that it isn't right. Well, I hope you enjoyed me making that kit. I'm going to use this as well for the next few repairs. I've got a couple of Spectrum boards to look at. And I quite enjoyed that. I still have that other testing board around, so I've actually got 2. I've got this one as well. What I have been doing, particularly with this board, is I can use both of them. So if I get a Spectrum that I'm not sure of, I can use that one. First off, just to see what happens. If I'm not happy with the results, I can then use that one, actually look at the LEDs and see what's going on. Hope you enjoy what I've done. If you like what I do, please subscribe, please give us a thumbs up, and I shall see you again soon. Thanks for watching.